Well, in that case, let's do it. And as always, we're going to recap the episode and we cut that out, host it separately. So if you find yourself just on that recap video, but want to hear our full discussion, it will be linked down below. Um, so yeah, man, do you want to kick us off on
Yeah.
this
So
recap?
this was episode 4 of the Ravening War. I think it was called Light and Shadow. There is a lot. It's a very meaty episode, so definitely will feel free to jump in details I may miss. And essentially, this episode, if you recall, the previous episode ended with this big moment of the assassination of Queen Pamela Rocks, and sort of this episode gives us kind of the fallout of that. We know from Matt in the outro of the previous episode that there is a time jump. Was it about 4 or 5 years? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I think so. 5 years, I want to say.
So essentially, this first half or first 2/3 of the episode is what's everybody been doing? And there's going to be two basic things that are going to happen. You're going to get kind of the last interaction or last thoughts and actions of a character, and then what have you been doing over the next 5 years? We're also going to see some characters pair up and some interesting pairings that we didn't expect. The first relationship we see is we see the former queen Amango talking to Karna and basically saying, I have to go. Like this basically isn't what I signed up for. Like I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I have to go. I have to leave. I want to go into hiding and disappear. This nice coffee mug, by the way.
Thanks.
I just don't want this. And Karna is pissed because Karna is the one who has been under the table orchestrating this marriage with King Tomate, or the hopeful King Tomate, for Tomate and Amango to get married. And Amango is like, I'm out. And Karna basically is like, this is going to ruin me. Like, you're going to ruin my life by doing this. And Amango is like, I'm sorry. The two players, by the way, have a very heated conversation. It gave me chills. It's a pretty incredible conversation that happens. But despite this, Karna lays the cards on the table of Amango's son and is like, I know about him. And Amango's like, this is what I have to do. I'm sorry. And Amango leaves and essentially leaves a letter for the Archbishop Rafanuel before she goes. And she leaves and goes to Uvano, I believe, where over the next 5 years, she's going to train. And she finds shelter there and raises her little one while also becoming a bit battle-hardened. Separate from her, Karna Solara is going to go to Rafanuel, and the two are going to share a conversation about Amango leaving. And there's this really wild moment where Rafanuel actually gives Karna a hug and feels on her body these soft, rotten spots where this sort of ailment of the power of the Hungry One seems to be literally decomposing Karna. And in fact, Rafanuel says as much that, it's often our gifts that betray us or something to that effect. Karna, over the next 5 years, is going to meet up with Thane D'Alessandro. And I'll get to more about kind of how she fills in there. But essentially becomes his spy master, essentially becomes this character who keeps him in the know and helps prop up his power and position in the Meatlands. Moving on to Thane D'Alessandro, there is a job opening because the last conversation he has before time jumping is with Colin Provolone. And Colin Provolone, they're both sort of hunkered in this cave, and Colin is not the happy-go-lucky character we've seen. He sort of challenges D'Alessandro and says, like, is this where you saw this going? Like, is this kind of what you were hoping for when we had, the FDA kind of promising making you a king, and here we are, like, in this cave? And Thane D'Alessandro basically challenges him back and says, like, this, I'm making the right decision. I've made the right decision for the Meatlands. Like, this is the right call, and either step up and be on my side or get out. And Colin basically says, I don't think you're the kind of leader that I want to follow. And additionally reveals that the secret that he'd been hiding was that his grandfather had led this uprising in the Dairy Islands before the people that he had allied with basically betrayed him. And that left Colin's dad destitute and poor as this sort of like hidden son people didn't know about. And Colin has always been ashamed of that secret, but realizes that, you know, this blackmail isn't worth the kind of life you're wanting me to live. And so Colin lays down his weapon, leaves, and we'll get to him in a second. But Karna essentially takes the position of Scald, and in fact is called as much. It's kind of a painful. I was like, "How are you going to do this to my man Colin?" Thane D'Alessandro, going back to the Meatlands, actually ends up propping up one of the other, rather than claiming the position of power for himself. Actually ends up propping up one of the other characters. I don't remember the name though. If you have it in front of you,
Basha Miyasho, or
And-
Basha is the first name.
yeah, this character Basha, who is a bit surprised that Thane D'Alessandro is supporting him, and in fact asks, like, "What about your mother, the chiefess?" And he basically says, you know, she will never be the kind of leader we need. So like, I'm here to serve you, and basically goes all in on being the best number 2 possible for Basha. And the chiefess is hurt by this, and in fact, Matt describes her leaving and never being heard from ever again. Very much a very painful outro for that character. And over the next 5 years with Karna at his side, Thane D'Alessandro basically fights for Basha and helps unite the Meatlands under Basha. Lou describes his character 5 years later, battle-hardened, hot, shirtless, and missing an eye as well. Very cool. Karna similarly, as she gets older and ripens, her phrasing, not being weird, her color changes to like this hot red color, and Aabria says she's entered her hot phase as well. There also is a diplomat from Candia, I believe, Princess Saphira. I think it was Saphira.
Yeah, I think so.
That, and I missed the detail here. They plan basically to assassinate her, and in fact, Karna is sent to do so, in which she does with relative ease. I don't remember why they wanted to assassinate her. I think I even asked you, like, why do they want to kill this person? And you weren't quite at that timestamp yet.
We'll like dissect this further in our discussion
Okay.
portion, but I'm pretty sure it was kind of to set up basically it's like another political assassination to turn Candia against Ceresia.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, you're right. So separate from them, what happens with Colin? So Colin leaves, and actually pairs up with Rafanuel, who is desperate. Rafanuel's desperate for an ally. And this is because Rafanuel, after seeing Karna and Amango leave, essentially goes back to Archbishop Camille Cauliflower, and is essentially like, hey, like this, essentially challenges her and says, like, I deserve to be part of this. I deserve to know like the full truth. And we find out that Camille Cauliflower has sort of been faking this old, hobbled, elderly woman. Matt describes her sort of like rising out of her chair in sort of this menacing way, and essentially tells Rafanuel that you'll never be the guy, basically. Like,
not
get
him.
in line. Yeah, you're not that guy. And Rafanuel, to Cauliflower's face, is like, okay, I will do whatever you need to support you. But then secretly, as an aside, begins calling in favors and trying to turn the Bulbian Church against the FDA, well, not specifically the FDA, but essentially is trying to sort of undo their work, and essentially trying to, as covertly as possible, go against the Sanctus Purus or Putris. There is a deception roll made, and I think he rolled like a 22 and lost to a 25 from Matt. All this to say, his scheming is found out. He's moved to Kameda to sort of like live out his days, and he is demoted to a deacon, which absolutely crushes Rafanuel, crushes him, and now he sort of loses his sense of purpose. Like, what was it all for? Like, I've lost my position, I've lost my power, I'm basically a nobody now in Kameda. And it's in this that in seeking purpose, he's like, I need to go back to that cave after we assassinated Queen Pamela Rocks. I need to go to that cave because that was the only time that I truly felt understood. And so in this, finds Colin Provolone, freshly having left Thane D'Alessandro, and through his own orchestrating and power he has left, has Colin Provolone knighted in the Bulbian Church as Sir Colin Provolone. And the two pair up to go to this cave where it is now crumbled and shuttered from some sort of like natural cave in, it seems. And Rafanuel is completely lost to this. I mean, he is aggressively trying to pull rocks away. Brennan does a phenomenal job of just characterizing sort of the descent into madness.
Yes.
Whereas, Rafanuel was this sort of suave, always a step ahead, is now essentially this misshapen form of that. Yeah, totally broken. And then I don't remember what happens 5 years later with him. I don't know if you can help me there.
Yeah, him and he basically says he and Colin kind of stick together for the most part, with Colin being kind of like, an arm of his sect of the church as this knight. So they like kind of remain together, and Brennan says he spends most of his time just like dedicated to writing like theology and writing like religious papers. Kind of uh he compared it to like the 99 Theses that like you go hammer on the church wall. Like he just wants to take down the Sanctus Putris. And
well,
yeah,
and what's interesting about his character is he basically, knowing that the Sanctus Putris's goal is to stave off oblivion by creating war and conflict, he basically resolves himself to not just undo their goal, but to, as best he can, hasten on that oblivion. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he's basically like, if they've been doing this to avoid annihilation, I am now hyper focused on ensuring annihilation. Which is just a great twist on his character. All this to say, as the years go on, the conflict stretches all the way up into Syresia. We mentioned the assassination of Safria, which sets the attention onto Syresia. Notably, Tomate is killed over these 5 years, and all players eventually find themselves in Syresia preparing for this massive battle, I think at Pengranos, maybe like the capital, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the capital.
All that to say, do you want to take it from there?
Yes, sir. I got you. One, it's not that important, but one quick detail I wanted to add is in Colin's like what he's been doing. He tells this one story of how he goes and finds the banana man that he killed during that fight. He goes and finds like his family and gives a little small banana child like a big sack of gold.
I found this on your property. I think.
Yeah,
I think this is yours. So Anyway.
So yeah, now we flash forward. We're 5 years later. The forces of Candia, the Meatlands, and Fructera have all basically arrived on Ceresia's doorstep at Pengranos to put an end to this war. So basically, this has brought all of our main cast back to the same spot again. So catching up with them once again, we start with Amango, who again had gone to Uvano to kind of reinvent herself, and we find out that she basically threw herself at their feet asking for help. She says, I'll do anything, put me to work. I'm leaving my old life behind. And as Blake mentioned, she kind of becomes like a warrior now. And Lord Gustavo Uvano, who is like a grape man, she ends up having this idea and confessing to him like, hey, at a dark time in my life, I actually, had a one night stand with, and I'm going to butcher this name, but Van Pinoir or something like that. And she basically reveals that that is her baby daddy, and she has this child that is not of the king's blood. It does not look like her. It actually looks like the Yuvanos. So she's like, "Could you please raise him as one of your own? Like, I'll do anything. I just want my child to be safe." And Gustavo, says, "Of course, we'll raise." I guess we don't have a name for the child yet, but we'll raise the child as one of the family. Um, and again, she says, "You have my undying gratitude. I'll do whatever." And she begins training, and becomes like a vital asset to the Uvano family, as both diplomat and warrior. And then because of this, she is on the front lines and has arrived. Cutting to Karna, which Blake mentioned, has basically been Delhi's right hand gal, helping, orchestrate for him and help align this assassination of the Princess Safria to get everything here. One interesting detail that we find out from her is that she has sacrificed her own eye in order to protect Delhi. Nothing specific is cited as to why she did this, but more so just like a ritualistic sacrifice to help just promote his well-being and ascension, if you will. Um, Delhi has, again, like Blake mentioned, just been propping up Basha, and has become a hardened warrior in his own right, lost an eye, just like Karna, and they too have arrived. And everyone is basically arriving to this war tent where all the leaders of these different factions are coming to discuss strategy. So that's kind of where everyone is walking up to. So then we cut to Colin and Rathaniel, who again they have stuck together and they are arriving. And Rathaniel basically has had this realization that his goals, his aspirations may not happen in his own lifetime, but he's made peace with that. And again, has just been writing all of these papers and stuff, trying to dismantle and destroy the Sanctus Putris and the FDA. Um, and there's some great dialogue here between Colin and Rathaniel, but I don't want to get too lost in the weeds. We'll probably discuss that more in a bit. But so they arrive as well. And the bishop has kept in touch with Delhi over these years. And one interesting thing that he says to him is that, hey, after this war, the people are going to need something hopeful to cling on to rebuild. And I don't know if Basha is the one to do that. And he kind of just putting this idea in Delhi's mind. And Delhi agrees, thinking that yeah, I don't, you're right, but I wonder if the people of the Meatlands are ready for religion, and I don't want to push Basha with too many crazy ideas too fast. And Karna's like, well, maybe Basha's not the man for it. Maybe you are. So there's this idea that maybe Delhi could usurp or take over Basha once the war is over. Anyway, we then cut back to sorry, I lost my spot here. Amun Go, who has fallen out of touch with Rathaniel over the past 5 years. She just, wanted to lay low, protect her child, and become a warrior. But she now sees Colin and Rathaniel after several years, and they're very happy to see each other. She apologizes to Rathaniel for leaving him behind, and he goes, "Did you do it for your protection or mine?" And she says both. She then tells Rathaniel about the child, but he asks, "Was it the king's?" And she won't tell him. Um, we then again, everyone is making their way into this tent, but some of the only the most important people, like the Gustavo and the Basha, the king of the Meatlands, are going in, while the rest of the characters are kind of staying outside. So they're having various conversations, but ultimately preparing for the fight to come the next day. And so they get their rest, but Rathaniel doesn't really get any sleep. He stays up all night, and he just has these visions of these whirring blades and the teeth. And Colin actually comes in the next day and he's Rathaniel's still freaking out. He's like, "Hey man, are you okay? You need to lock it in. We're getting,
Yeah, we need you
it's
to
getting to be go
lock this
time."
down, man. It's great.
It's an amazing moment. But so then, everyone's making their way again to the war tent to discuss strategy. And, Blake and I haven't seen A Crown of Candy, but there are some massive cameos in this moment where we see Prince Tarthur Cheddar, which I don't know if that is necessarily a cameo or not. But we have Prince Amethar of Candia and his sister Rococo, I think. Um, and also Manta Jack, who is seemingly Prince Amethar's like best friend, right hand man. So they're all kind of, again having their meeting, but Rathaniel notices this like shadow dart behind a hill, and it's this weird spindly creature with this bone mask, and it's exactly like what they saw when they found that cave after assassinating the queen. So he starts freaking out, immediately darts after it because again, he is obsessed with this. Like Blake mentioned, it's the only place he felt welcome. So he goes out after it and eventually finds this like hole dug in the ground, and all the other characters are kind of chasing him after he darts off to this. Rathaniel just instantly dives into it and starts like climbing through it, and it begins to get wider and wider and basically opens up into this full tunnel system. And he eventually comes across three more of these creatures that are like digging, and he immediately has his detect thoughts open mind and is just saying like, I'm here, like don't be afraid, like I'm ready to be a part of this, essentially. And the thoughts he gets back are not in language. They are like emotions, anxiety, worry, like oh no. And he's like, no, don't worry, like the cave told me I'm ready now, like I'm finally ready. And these creatures like release these spores just like they did we saw previously, and because of this Rathaniel can now understand. And they say, you shouldn't be here, we are forbidden to be seen. And Rathaniel's like, no, like I'm ready, if you just give me this power I can destroy our enemies. um, and there's a lot of interesting stuff talked about here, which we'll talk about more in the discussion, but they talk about the heart of the mycelium is the heart of Saphrophus or something, the heart of ice. And meanwhile, the rest of the characters are catching up, and they're like, okay, what are we doing? And the creatures are like, Saphrophus must be protected. They promised. And then suddenly another voice is heard coming around the corner, and it is a member of the FDA, decked out in the robes and the mask. And they're like, oh God. And Rathaniel just immediately casts Shatter. And that's where the episode ends.
An amazing outro moment, by the way. You guys should definitely catch that if you can, with the cast of Shatter. So great job,
Yes.
man. So that is the recap for episode 4, Light and Shadow of the Ravening War. Again, if you're watching just the recap, we'll have the full episode discussion and thoughts down below. Otherwise, we will get into it and chat about it. So,
Yeah. Let's piece this together.
bro, so much in this episode.